I think a mistake I made was when I assumed I knew everything. For example, the deferred action, which is related to undocumented students and being protected from deportation and a work permit and things like that, which is beneficial to students. One thing I made a mistake was in telling a student what I thought it was without really knowing the details about it. And so I struggle with it still today because I've looked for the student because I feel really bad I gave him wrong information. And you know, like, I don't know if the student ended up applying and things like that. And so I feel guilty about it. And so I hope he ended up applying for the deferred action. But what I learned from it, which I think happens, is that we all make mistakes, but we should be able to learn from those. And what I learned from it is that even though sort of my world revolves around undocumented students, that doesn't mean I know everything, and that I myself also need to take the time to talk to professionals about, you know, if it's the law or things like that, so that I am well prepared to be able to talk to others about things like that. And I think that's important for us as young people, that it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, but to also take the time to reflect on it and talk to other people about it, because, you know, making mistakes could mean that others are affected negatively by that, and so other people should be involved in that and trying to resolve it. You know, in my case, in that case, it wasn't necessarily, I think, that damaging. But you know, I did have to talk to someone and sort of try to find the student and things like that and try to correct it. But more importantly too is that I'm not making the same mistake, and that I'm taking my time to learn about things and so on. I think two things. One, I think that I really like the idea of that we use at the Citizens League, which is that we're all that we are all policymakers. I think a lot of the times we think of makers only like elected officials, or only in Washington, D.C. or at the state capitol in St. Paul. And what I like this idea of, you know, everyone is a policymaker, is that we all have something to contribute to something. And that also means that we're policymakers everywhere, and that you know, our actions and are part of a bigger picture and are part of a culture, and you know, and whether that's at work, at a school, or at church, or if you work in government, you know, creating good policies is important. And also being a civic leader, I think, you know, we often think that and praise, you know, public service, and when we think about public service, we only think about elected officials, so people who work in government, and that's one thing, and that's important. But I think we should all see ourselves as civic leaders, and that we have and we can do something where we are, and that you know, oftentimes we assume, like, you know, poor people can't contribute to this and that, and this idea that we're all civic leaders means that no matter our circumstances, we can all do something, and we all have something to contribute, and we all need to take different approaches to creating change and doing things. Um, the other thing I think for us as young people to that is important to do is to find places where we're challenged in our ideology. I think, and I myself have sort of, sorry, I got distracted. I think myself, I count myself or I've sort of sometimes found myself in bubbles where everybody thinks the same as I do, and everybody wants to take the same actions as I do, and so on. And that's fine sometimes, but I think it's important that we find people who challenge us, and that we find people who disagree with us, because by talking to people who disagree with us, then we can get at really our core values and our principles as individuals, and we're able to deeply explore what we think about things or how we want to do things. Because when you're in a bubble, no one's challenging you. You sort of assume that everything is done the same way, or everything or everybody thinks the same way, and that when we're randomly challenged, then we don't know how to respond and what to say, and that to me is important as I grow older, and as a professional, that I have good answers to what I believe, and not just assume that everybody believes what I believe.